Welcome to The Explainer. Look, we've got an absolutely wild corporate disconnect to talk about today. On one hand, you have OpenAI, a company literally building transformative, world-changing artificial intelligence. The tech is undeniably brilliant. But on the other hand, we're looking at a corporate structure that is just, well, jaw-droppingly fragile. Today, we're unpacking exactly why OpenAI's highly anticipated IPO might hit some massive speed bumps, and why sheer governance chaos is suddenly their absolute biggest valuation risk. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Amateur city. Think about that phrase for a second. That's not some bitter former employee talking. Those two words came straight from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. Microsoft happens to be the steward of a mind-boggling $228 billion stake in OpenAI. But here's the real kicker. Nadella said this under oath in a federal courtroom back in May 2026. This absolutely devastating description from their own biggest investor is now a permanent public record. And you better believe every single word of that testimony is destined to appear in the SEC disclosures OpenAI has to file before going public.
And honestly, the stakes could not possibly be higher. We are talking about a rumored $1 trillion valuation. A trillion? But here's what we really need to take away from this. Public markets, they don't just put a price tag on cool software. They price the whole package. They price the accountability, the internal structure, and how leadership holds up when institutional investors put them under microscope. If the foundation holding up that trillion-dollar empire is shaky, trust me, Wall Street's going to spot it from a mile away. Section 1. Legal wins and looming subpoenas. Now, what's really interesting about this is the massive gap between the headlines and the legal reality. Let's look at the legal illusions kind of floating around the company right now. The media narrative was that Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI got thrown out, right? It sounded like a total victory. But actually, if you look at the legal reality, the jury just dismissed it based on the statute of limitations. It was literally just a calendar problem. The court absolutely never ruled that OpenAI's corporate structure was sound or flawless. They just said Musk waited too long to file. And that unresolved structural distinction, that matters hugely for an S1 filing, because the underlying governance questions were never actually answered. And because those core questions remain unanswered, the legal and political wheels are still turning. Musk's attorney already intends to appeal, and on the political side, Representative James Comer's House Oversight Committee has officially subpoenaed documents related to OpenAI's internal audit committee with a hard deadline of May 22nd. So these are real, factual, institutional hurdles. You can't just sweep impending congressional subpoenas under the rug and hope the market ignores them.
Section 2. An executive workforce revolt.
Let's pivot to the internal executive chaos because it's a lot. Former CTO Mira Murati gave sworn testimony that paints a really intense picture of internal dysfunction. She testified that CEO Sam Altman actively pitted executives against each other and wasn't always straightforward with his board. Just walk through this staggering timeline with me. First, co-founder Ilya Sutskever spends a year building a 52-page dossier on Altman. Second, he takes it to the board and they actually fire Altman. Third, the entire workforce completely revolts. And finally, under all that immense employee pressure, Sutskever basically flips, votes to reinstate Altman himself, and calls it a Hail Mary. Institutional allocators looking for a stable place to park billions of dollars are going to read this sequence of events and instantly recognize a highly unstable governance structure. Formal oversight literally collapsed under employee pressure. To really bring this point home, check out this 2017 diary entry from Greg Brockman that was actually read aloud in court. I would actually be warm to steal the nonprofit from him, to convert to a BC Corp without him. Let that sink in. These aren't just spicy rumors or water cooler gossip. These are sworn, permanent court exhibits that are still just lingering out there, completely unresolved.
Section 3. The incentive architecture.
Now, to truly get to the deepest conflict of all, we have to look at the financial incentive architecture surrounding Sam Altman himself. Let's start with a number, $76,001. That's Altman's nominal annual salary from OpenAI. And he holds absolutely zero direct equity in OpenAI, none. But Forbes estimates his personal net worth at $3.3 billion. So, where exactly is all that wealth coming from? And this brilliantly illustrates the answer, that wealth comes from investments in over 400 outside startups. But here's the massive catch. Many of these startups have huge commercial ties right back to OpenAI. Just consider this. He owns a third of Helion Energy, which signed a massive power agreement for OpenAI's data centers. He has a $3.2 million stake in Cerebras Systems, a company that got a $10 billion compute contract from OpenAI. Oh, and a $633 million stake in Stripe, the very company that processes OpenAI's payments. The mechanism here is crystal clear. OpenAI's massive spending decisions are literally acting as the instrument for the CEO's personal enrichment. It's a system where his financial rewards run through the vendors, not the company he actually leads. And regulators are taking notice. 10 Republican state attorneys general have formally stepped in and asked the SEC to closely scrutinize these specific, unresolved financial conflicts before any IPO is allowed to proceed. The regulatory spotlight is firmly pointed right at these financial entanglements.
Section 4. The WeWork Warning. So why does all this matter for the IPO? Well, large, patient institutional capital demands stability. When they anchor an IPO, it's a signal to the market that serious money has checked under the hood and everything looks solid. Let's pull up a historical precedent, WeWork in 2019. When WeWork filed their S-1, all this CEO self-dealing and a crazy governance structure came to light. Institutional confidence vanished instantly. The valuation crashed from $47 billion to around $10 billion in a matter of weeks. The underlying real estate business hadn't changed, but the structure holding it up simply couldn't survive public scrutiny. Now contrast that with OpenAI in 2026. Their S-1 is vastly more complex, the conflicts are still unresolved, and the technology is infinitely more consequential. Applying public scrutiny to this kind of private structure could obliterate their valuation overnight.
Which brings us to a really important realization. When institutional capital gets nervous, bankers hit the brakes. A delay in the OpenAI IPO wouldn't mean their AI tech is bad. Are you kidding? The market is obsessed with what they build. But a delay would actually be the most rational, logical outcome, a necessary pause to fix an architecture that's just far too fragile for the relentless demands of the public markets right now. So that leaves us with this final provocative thought for today. Will OpenAI take a step back and institute the structural reforms that institutional allocators require, or are they going to rush forward and risk the absolutely ruthless, unforgiving scrutiny of the public market? Can an amateur city really support a trillion-dollar empire, or do they have to tear down their own foundation and rebuild it first? It's like a giant puzzle, and the entire financial and tech world is watching closely to see how the pieces fall. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll catch you next time.